Hello again, everybody. This is Brian speaking. This video is going to cover three different topics, and this is good for the Linux CTS 2321 class, Linux Fundamentals. And what this video is going to cover is basically number one, downloading and installing the free VM Workstation Player program from the VMware website. It is a free download and it enables you to run Linux as a virtual machine within your Windows system. So the first part of this video will cover downloading and installing the VM Workstation Player program. The second part of the video is going to be downloading the Linux Mint Cinnamon 18.2 ISO file. The ISO file is sort of like the install disk in Windows. It contains the operating system and everything else included in that distribution of Linux. So the second part of the video, we're going to actually download the ISO file onto our Windows hard drives. The third step is going to be creating a Linux virtual machine inside of the VMware Player software using the ISO file that we downloaded. So we're going to start out with nothing, and we're going to wind up with VMware Workstation Player installed, functional, with a Linux 18.2 Cinnamon virtual machine on it. So that's the purpose of the following video. Okay, step number one is we want to download the VMware Workstation Player from the VMware website. After we download the program, we then want to go ahead and install the VMware Workstation Player software onto our Windows hard drive. That will log it into the registry and do everything else Windows needs when you install a program. And it will basically make the VMware an integral part of our Windows machine, which we can then use to run Linux on. So let's go ahead and see the details on that. So to download VMplayer using, in this case, Windows 7, you first open up a web browser. In this case, I'm using Google Chrome. And you wait for the web browser to open up. And it takes a few minutes, especially based on your internet connection speed. And I'm using a wireless connection here. I'm going to go ahead and maximize the window, give you a little better view. And what you want to do, you want to go to VMware.com, as you can see up in my browser window there. And that takes you to the VMware website. You then want to go to the sidebar where it says Downloads, and you want to locate Workstation Player. Workstation Player. You want to click on that, and you have two options. One is for Windows, one is for Linux. Well, we want to put Linux on, but we want to put it on a Windows machine. So we're going to go ahead and download VMplayer for Windows. That way we can actually run a Linux VM on a Windows system without touching any of the configuration or anything having to do with the Windows section. So we wait for our little download window. You see it there in the lower left-hand corner. You see it's downloading. And we want to wait for it to finish downloading, and it can take a little bit of time. Again, it depends on a lot of variables, your connection speed, things of that nature. So we just watch the time tick down on our little download window until the file's completely finished downloading. Or we could right-click on the little arrow and say Open when finished. Okay, it's finished downloading. So now we go to our little arrow and we click Open. Okay, when we click Open, that executes the install file which we downloaded. You see Workstation Player version 12 by VMware. There it is on the screen. And now we just have to wait for the installer file to finish executing. So we have our little window down in the lower right-hand corner right now, you could see. And again, this requires a little bit of patience. So there may be a little bit of time where I'm not necessarily talking. If you just focus on the video, you should see what it does. Okay, things go away now. You see down on the bottom, the taskbar area that you see half of. Okay, right there. That's the installer file. That's down in the taskbar area. That's going to change color in a minute. And when it changes color, that means it needs my permission to execute something. So I'm going to have to click on it to give it permission. That's why I kind of keep clicking on it now, see if it's ready yet. But I'd probably have to wait till it changes blue, and then I'll click on it again. So right now things are working. It doesn't look like they're working. Okay, they are. You see it turned blue and it's blinking. So I click on it and I hit next. Okay, you have to agree to the terms and licensing and then click next. Okay, you follow the instructions there. Okay, now I'm going to uncheck the box where it says send stuff back to VMware because I don't like sending stuff to anybody. I'm a little private. I'll leave the other one checked for now. Click next. And put the icon on the desktop, yes, that you want, and the start menu. And now you're ready to go. So you click install. And then you just kind of want to sit back and watch the action. And it'll go through its gyrations. And you'll see the status of your install as it goes through. So again, we just kind of want to let computer nature take its course for right now. It's sort of on what we call autopilot. And again, you just downloaded the install file. Actually, it's downloading parts of the software even as it's installing them. And after this gets done, we will be able to create a virtual machine in Windows. So we just keep our eye on the ball, so to speak. And again, depending on your hardware speed, it may not take this long. It may go quicker. It may go slower. This was done on a laptop using an i3 processor with a wireless internet connection. So, of course, if you have an i7 hooked up to wired, you're going to get a lot quicker. If you have like a dual core, of course, it's going to go slower. But this at least gives you an idea of the speed. You see that little thing there? Install files execute a lot of things in the background while they're running that you don't really see going on, but they're going on. And they use CPU cycles and other resources. So that's why, depending on the complexity of the program, installations can take a while. But hopefully once you get them going, they go. So we just sit and wait and watch, and this will come to a good conclusion. I know that much. Okay, the little bar goes on, and now we get it. Okay, so we click finish. And now we should have Workstation on our computer. So we will close our internet window. There in the upper left, you see the icon for VMplayer, which I will move down because I don't like having stuff in that upper window because that's where new things go. I like to organize my desktop. The first time you run it, it's going to want either an email address or an activation code. If you don't have an activation code, fine, just give it an email, any email. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my Daytona State email. So I put what you all know is my Daytona State, brian@abrams@daytonastate.edu, since that's my school email. And this will give me unlimited usage of it for free. And I click continue. And there we go. I got VMplayer up and running. Now, just to see if there's any bugs that we got to get worked out on first time runs, I'll close it and then I'll run it again. I'll move it down a little bit just to set it off a little bit. And then I'll run it again. And you see it comes up cleanly. So I'm now ready. Okay, it wants me to install some more stuff here. I'll take the appropriate action there. I think I got everything cleared out of the initial start phase of it. Just to make sure, I will close it again and then double click it again just to make sure that it comes up clean. And it does. So we're ready to go with VMware, VMplayer workstation. Okay, now we're going to actually take our computer, go to the linuxmint.com website, and we're going to download the 18.2 Cinnamon ISO file. So let's go see how that is done. Okay, in this video, we're going to download the Linux ISO file. So again, you open up a web browser, in this case, Google again, and you go to linuxmint.com. So I type in linuxmint.com, and it takes me to the Linux Mint website. Now, you have to be a little careful here because you don't want to get snookered. If you see that great big blue start download key, if you click on that, it's going to try to give you something that you don't necessarily want. I'll demonstrate that in a minute. This is a little bit about what our linuxmint.com page looks like. Okay, so you might want to poke around a little bit like I'm doing here. Just explore. Okay, you can get different options up there. You can get the Linux Mint blog. Okay, which is where we're going to download from. You see Linux Mint 18.2 Sonia. I mentioned that big download now button, and you see what happens when I click it. It's trying to give me a file converter. I don't want a file converter. I'm a little disappointed Linux would do this in their own website, but they did. But I just wanted to demonstrate it to you so you know to avoid it. Now what we want to do, we want to come down, scroll down on the page to the mirrors, the repository mirrors, because a lot of places host Linux Mint. And we want to pick a good one. Doesn't matter which one you pick, really. I like a USA one. So I'm going to pick one that's close to home. Okay, so let me find one I live in Florida, as you know. So let me find one that's close to home. So you click on it, and again, you see in your lower left corner, your download window open up. That means that the ISO image is downloading from the repository, okay, that I picked. So, again, we want to be a little patient here while these things can take some time. And like I said, I'm using a kind of a laptop with a wireless connection. So it'll work. There we have it right there. There's our little box. I'll point to it a little bit so you could see what's going on, and it'll tell you how much longer it takes to download. It doesn't take that long when you think about you're downloading a full-fledged operating system. And this is version 18.2 Cinnamon, which is the newest, the latest and the greatest, so to speak. So we'll give it a little bit of time. While we wait, maybe I can kind of kill a little time here while this thing downloads. It's downloading. And we see the time clicking down, clicking down, clicking down. And I'm going to scroll down a little bit just to show you a little more about what's on the page. You see, you have other material on this blog here, this Linux Mint blog. So I just want to scroll down to show you all the other stuff that you can't see, which if you want you could take a look at. You could read some of it in more detail while you're waiting for it to download. And when it's done downloading, just to give you a heads up, depending on which version of Windows you run, I'm running Windows 7, so it's going to be in my users subdirectory or folder. Laptop 2, which is the name of the computer I downloaded it into, and then it'll be in the downloads folder on the third level down from the bottom. So it's basically, and I'll demonstrate this when it's finished downloading, it'll be computer, users, laptop 2, and downloads. So that's where the file is gonna be when it's finished. Now if you're using Windows 8, 8.1, 10, it's whatever protocol your version of Windows uses, so adjust accordingly. Because of my personal preferences, I like using Windows 7 as long as it's supported. So that's the version of Windows I personally am going to be using up until January 20th, I believe, 2020, or is it January 14th, 2020 is when support will end. And up until that time, I'm going to keep using it. So we just wait here, and the clock's ticking away. And there's a lot of data we're downloading. Very high, what they used to call a baud rate here, back in the old school days. So it'll click. And then I'll go and I'll show you where it is. And at that point, we can go ahead and use it in the VM we created earlier. And we can create our Linux virtual machine. We have one of the components done, the virtual machine program, the VMware. And now we're downloading the ISO file, which we're going to create the VM from. You could also create a live CD with your ISO file so that you could boot your computer off the live CD. You could create a USB boot stick so you can actually boot from a USB stick this way too. In fact, I actually had a client the other day where I did just that. I used a USB boot stick because her computer didn't have a CD drive. It was one of these little netbooks. So, but the USB stick worked like a champ, and I got Linux up and running on a formerly Windows 7 netbook. And she's going to be switching to Linux now. Okay, so we're finished downloading. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close my browser. And just to demonstrate where it is, like I said, computer, C drive, go down to users. Okay, go to the lap 2. I enlarged it. Go to downloads. Okay, and there it is. It's highlighted right there. That's our ISO file, which we can now use in a myriad of ways. The final part of the video now is we're actually going to take the VMware software and create a virtual machine in the VMware using the Linux ISO file that we just downloaded from the Linux Mint website. And after this step, we will have a working Linux machine, a virtual machine that is, running on our Windows system, which we can call up and use anytime. So let's see how that's done. Okay, this is where the rubber meets the road here. We're actually going to install our virtual machine. So we click on the VMware icon. Let me maximize that. We click on our VMware icon, and that is going to bring up VMplayer, which we just downloaded. Click Create a New Virtual Machine. We don't want to use a disk, we want to use an ISO file. So we click the ISO file, we go to Browse, okay, we're going to go to Computer, like I said, my computer, users, laptop 2, and downloads, and there's the Linux ISO file right there. So we open it up, and we're all set. We click Next, okay. And we guessed operating system. Well, it's going to be Linux. So we want to click Linux. Now, one word about the version, I'll click on it and show you. Linux Mint is not listed as a version of Linux specifically for VMplayer. But luckily, because of what I know about Linux, I know that Linux is an Ubuntu derivative. So we'll scroll up and you see there's no Mint anywhere. It's alphabetical. So knowing that Mint is an Ubuntu derivative, and I'm using the 64-bit, which is what we downloaded, I put Ubuntu 64-bit. Then I click Next again. And it's going to say virtual machine name, Ubuntu 64-bit. It's going to give me the location where it is. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. Wants to know my virtual disk capacity. 20 gigabytes should be fine. That's the default. And I'm going to want to split the virtual disk into multiple files. That just makes it easier to manage. If I wanted to customize my hardware, I could click on Customize Hardware. You see we have different options present within the VMplayer program, but the defaults are fine in this case. So I'm just going to stick to the defaults. I'm going to click Finish. And now you notice Ubuntu 64-bit is in my VMplayer. I click on Play Virtual Machine. Now, what it's going to be doing, because I'm playing from the virtual machine, is it's going to go to the file location, get that ISO. It'll give me a bunch of stuff about hardware issues. I'm just going to OK them because I don't care about keyboard timeouts or anything like that. So I'm just going to check Don't Show Me Again and click OK. Now it's going to start, and it's actually booting Linux from that ISO file. Now it wants to download some tools too, but I'm going to ask it to remind me later because you can't really put the tools in until you put the operating system on. So it is asking me a little prematurely. So I'm going to go ahead and click Remind Me Later. I'm going to bring this up a little bit so you could kind of see the whole window. And what it's actually doing now is it's logging into or booting into the ISO file of Linux Mint from the hard drive, from the location where we downloaded it to. So it'll take a couple of minutes, and we should, there we go, we get our machine here, our Linux machine. So you see this right here? I know we got three cursors, so it's a little confusing right now. This is the one that's circling that CD that I'm on. Okay, I also have one when I generated the video file for this. I'm actually doing a voiceover. You want to click on that, or we want to click on that. Okay, and what that's going to do is it's actually going to take the operating system from that ISO file and install it onto the virtual hard drive in our virtual machine. We do want to install third-party graphics. That helps it go quicker. So we'll hit Continue. Okay, it's going to chug away a little bit because remember I'm running my screen recorder, the virtual machine, and my Linux install program. So this laptop that I'm running all this on, it has quite a bit of load. Now, what we want to do here, we want to erase the disk and install Linux Mint, because remember, we're doing this in a VM. You do not want to do this if you want to dual boot, okay? But because this is a virtual disk, it's blank anyway. Okay, this is just saying what partitions are going to be created. We have our ext4 and our swap partition. So we're going to go ahead and continue with that. And so now it knows it's got the 20 gigabyte virtual disk we set aside. And it also has, okay, we're into the install program now. It wants to know our time zone, which is New York, because we're not in Seattle or like Microsoft is or anything like that. Okay, language is going to be English, of course. So we click on that. Now it wants a name for our computer. And for the Linux course in my class here, we always use Tech, T-E-C-H. Even in class, we use tech on the Macs for our VMs. And for password, the course name CTS 2321. See how it changes from weak to strong. Confirm the password CTS 2321, which is what we use on all our machines. Require password to log in, and I'm going to go ahead and continue. And this should start the actual installation process. So you see down here, it's copying files. Okay, and it's going to continue to copy files. What I'm going to do sort of at this point, I want to move it up a little bit more because you see I have more stuff coming through. Remember I said about the tools, remind me later. But you notice here, I got to get this media player thing out of the way. Okay, down here, and I don't want to touch the mouse. It says VM on the bottom in the middle there. VMware Tools enables many features and improves mouse movement, video, and performance. Log into the guest operating system and click Install. That's why I don't want to install it yet, because I want to finish installing it so I could log in and then install the tools. This is going to take a while, so I am going to kind of fast forward through it a little bit. But if you watch your bottom bar here, okay, you will see that it is progressing. So because I'm running the video on Windows Media Player doing a voiceover, makes it kind of easy for me to kind of forward a little bit. So you see it's still copying files. I'll forward it a little more. Okay, now it's installing the system. Now, bear in mind, I didn't touch anything. I just basically forwarded the video. So this is still running from before. Then it's going to check for packages to install. It's going to install any packages. Forward it a little more. Now, you notice you get this nice, while it's installing, if you want to read, since I'm skipping over a lot of it, it kind of gives you a little tour of Linux right up here. Okay, you see right up here where the little hand is. So you could watch that while it's installing, get a little familiar with it. Okay, this is my cursor here from my studio computer that I'm recording this on. This is my spinning Linux cursor from the computer, the laptop that I made the actual video portion on. Like I said, I'm doing a voiceover on a desktop, which I use as like a little studio machine that's running Windows 7 and VMware. But this whole video was made on a laptop where I actually installed the VMplayer software and the ISO file and created the virtual machine all on the laptop while I was running what they call a simple screen recorder. So that's how I got the video part. So we'll advance it a little bit more because this could take some time. You see we're starting to get close to the end right here. Okay, so we'll go through again. Okay, now you see here, let me pause that. Installation is finished. You can continue testing Linux now, but until you restart your computer, any changes you make or documents you save will not be preserved because we're still running off a live CD. Okay? After we restart and we're on the hard drive, then we could go interactive. So I'm going to release the pause, and I'm going to hit restart now. And the machine will come back basically telling me to remove any boot media, which I don't have to physically remove because I'm booting off an ISO file on the hard drive, and hit enter. Okay, right down here. Right here. Okay, so I remove it, I hit enter, and now you see the machine is going to boot up. Okay, only now I'm booting directly off the hard drive. I'm not booting off the ISO file now. I'm booting off the virtual hard drive that's part of the virtual machine within VMplayer. That's what I'm doing now. And I still have, it wants me to get the tools, which I'll handle later. So we'll let it chug away. Notice how it wants you to log on to a TTY When you study Linux, you know what those TTYs are. It actually has to open a TTY before it can even give you a graphical window. Okay, there I am. I'm installed. It wants my login password. So I'll put in my CTS 2321, which is the course number for the Linux course. And lo and behold, you wait a few seconds, and I should see a nice Linux start screen, hear a little pretty music. Different from the Windows music, quite different from the Windows music. So we'll just sort of give it, there we go. And you notice that icon isn't there anymore. Now, I don't need this anymore. So I'm going to uncheck the dialog box to show that on startup, and then I'm going to close that out. Okay, that just tells you a little bit about the system. Welcome. Thank you for choosing Linux Mint. Tells you a little like a welcome screen. So I'm going to close that. Okay, I have this thing about, okay, now I'm going to go ahead and install the tools. Okay, because I'm logged in, so everything should work. So it's downloading the VM tools for Linux. And like I said, this is actually going into my virtual machine that I've created on the laptop, which I made the video on. So that's downloading. And when that's done, afterwards, I'll be able to close that out. Okay, here a little blip there. Okay, and now I'll just close this out here. Okay, it gave me my home directory. So let me X out of this, and I'll close out my window that's open here. And there I am, saying I have a DVD even. That's a virtual DVD, of course. I have a thing about date and time. I like things using the 12-hour clock. So one of the first things I like to do is go in and uncheck, use the 24-hour clock. That's what it looks like when you maximize it. So I'll just go and I'll click on the 24-hour clock. Okay. Okay, I'll go back and do that again. Okay. And you'll see the 1352 change to 152. Okay, there we go. Click on that. Okay, there we go. Now we can close that out. Right, like that. Okay, and there we go. We have a Linux desktop. We can now hit menu. We can go to the menu button. We can go to shut down. And that will automatically, as you could see, deactivate the VMware and give us our Windows desktop back. So we're back with our Windows desktop. Just to show you how it works, I'm going to click the VMware button again. Okay, bring up VMware. You now see down there where it says Ubuntu 64-bit. I click on that. I hit Play Virtual Machine. And without any further intervention whatsoever, I just wait a few minutes for the appropriate boot time, and I should have my virtual machine up and running. And you see it loading right there. Okay, and we're almost finished. Okay, this is machine speak. It's telling itself it's logging into the TTY so that it could load the graphical user interface right there. Now you get a little bit of a blank screen and a couple. Okay, bingo. There's our login screen. We could type in again our password, which is CTS2321, the standard password for the Linux course. And lo and behold, a couple of minutes later, we should hear our music and get our desktop. So, got to be a little patient in the computer field sometimes. They're super fast if you figure what they're doing, but they do so much. And there is our Linux desktop right there. So, with that in mind, I can now Just want to show you a few things here. Okay. They did a little new graphic, so I'll go down to that menu button. Oops. Go down to the menu button and go to the little on-off button and shut down. And wait for the machine to shut down. It'll automatically put us back into Windows. And I hope all of you got something out of this and that you can go ahead and install it.